Today we've got a great revenge story all about a wet seat. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, our next story is neighbor let his dog poop in my lawn daily, so I launched a neighborhood smear campaign, literally and figuratively. This happened a couple of years ago when I bought my first house in a chill little neighborhood. Everything was great except for one thing, my back neighbor Rick. Rick's the kind of guy who owns 2 grills but no shirt, drinks Coors Light in the driveway at 10 a.m., and thinks property lines are just a suggestion. Rick also had a massive golden retriever named Duke. Duke was cool, friendly, but had a very specific habit. He loved to drop the nastiest logs right in the middle of my lawn. Not near the sidewalk, not behind a tree, dead center, like it was his sacred spot every dang day. First couple of times, I figured maybe Rick didn't realize it, so I walked over, super polite, and asked if he could maybe keep Duke on a leash, or at least scoop the poop when it happened. Rick, wearing a tank top that said Weekend Warrior, looks me dead in the eye and goes, "It's all nature, bro. You don't own the earth." Oh, we're doing that. So I tried the normal stuff, patched the fence, put in a motion-activated sprinkler, even tried some citrus deterrent. Nothing worked. Rick actually laughed when he saw the sprinkler and said, "Nice try, but Duke's built different." Cool, I'm built different too. Here's where the revenge starts. I started by collecting Duke's turds in a Home Depot bucket, lined it with a trash bag, used a scoop, added a little water for aesthetic reasons. After about 2 weeks, I had something that looked like a cursed soup. One Saturday morning while Rick was out, I took that bucket and painted the border of his yard, sprinkled it like fairy dust right along his deck and around his precious fire pit area. He came out later that day, sniffed the air, and literally went, "What the heck is that smell?" I was sitting on my porch drinking coffee like, "Smells like nature, bro." But wait, it gets better. We have a neighborhood Facebook group. I started posting lost dog poop updates every time Duke hit my yard. Found steaming hot dog present near my mailbox. If this belongs to you, please collect your property before it fossilizes. Thanks. Then I started putting up tiny little "do not poop here" signs made out of popsicle sticks and toothpicks, complete with glitter and googly eyes all over the lawn. I made them in weird passive-aggressive haiku form. "Dear Duke the Pooper, this is not your golden throne. My grass feels betrayed." Rick was not amused. He actually stormed over one day and yelled, "Are you trying to make me look bad?" I just blinked and said, "Buddy, I don't need to try." After all that, the neighborhood fully turned on him. A couple of other people came forward and said Duke had been leaving surprises in their yards too. Rick ended up having to build an actual fenced-in dog run and started walking Duke on a leash like a normal human. And me? I still make those little haiku signs for fun. You know, I think it's great that OP used this dog poop escapade as an excuse to break out the arts and crafts for a little while. Like, I like to imagine OP has a little box that they stick on the top shelf of their closet that has like the popsicle sticks and the glitter and all that stuff. OP just needed that excuse to go and pull it off that shelf and break it out and have that elementary school Friday fun day kind of experience with it. Who knew that all OP needed was a dog just consistently annihilating their yard to have so much fun? Expletive Faces commented, "I had a neighbor that did this. After repeatedly asking them politely to keep their dog out of my yard, I started picking up the poop, putting it in a bag, and leaving it in their driveway. They still didn't change. I left the bag on their front porch. Still no change. I finally started throwing it from my shovel all over their front yard. Think a bunch of crap confetti in the grass, flower beds, on the siding, you name it. It finally stopped." Emmeline commented, "This happened with my husband too. We used to rent the top floor of a house, and the basement tenants were always a bit sketchy. The one that ended up being a deal breaker for us had a pit bull he kept tied on a short rope in our front yard all the time. It was a super sweet dog and I felt awful for him, but for my husband, it was more than the neglect. But he never walked his dog, and my husband, who used to work at a golf course in his 20s, is serious about his lawn. He's meticulous, he takes pride in his edging and his lines, and this poor dog was not only wearing a bald circle in the middle of the lawn from pacing, but Buddy never picked up the poo. My husband, a couple of times, knocked downstairs and told Buddy he wanted to mow and to come clean up, and Buddy said, "Just mulch it in," and shut the door in his face. Finally, my husband was so mad, he took a grain shovel, scooped it all up bit by bit, throwing it all down Buddy's steps into his little cement entryway and all over his back door. He came inside fuming, called our landlord, and put in our notice. I never got to hear Buddy's reaction, but I wish I was watching when he got home. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy crazy stories of revenge, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? Our next story is Roommate Who Can't Clean Up After Himself. In college, I shared an apartment with another guy who couldn't be bothered to clean up. He'd, not always, but often enough, leave trash on the floor, take out on the living room table, that sort of thing. And when I called him out on it, his response would be that if it bothered me that much, why didn't I just throw it away for him and move on with life? One fine day, he poured himself a glass of milk and drank probably about a third of it before putting it on the dining room table and leaving it there while he went on a spring break trip for a week. I moved it to his bedroom nightstand and closed the door before going on my own 1 week-long trip. I turned off the AC, and did I mention this was in Louisiana, where even during spring it gets uncomfortably hot? He returned from his vacation to a humid and hot bedroom that reeked of spoiled milk and nasty bacteria. Of course, he complained, but I just politely told him that I hadn't tossed it because I thought he'd left it out because he wanted to resume drinking it when he returned. Yeah, he complained about it, which is good, but the problem is, with a lot of people like this, you would think that the idea and the counter to it would be that you just don't clean it up and you allow it to fester and hopefully get to a point where they realize, maybe I should do better and clean up after myself. I think the problem is, for the person to have gotten to that point, they're more than comfortable of just wallowing in that filth. Octo2195 commented, had a dorm room in a high-rise building. We were in the 9th floor, senior year, got set up with 5 other guys I did not know. One guy was a world-class slob. Got to the point where I kept all my food and kitchen supplies in my locked room. The guy left a super messy kitchen, sink full of dirty dishes, pots, and pans. We asked him to clean up before leaving for the weekend. He did not. He left the building. We waited for him to come out of the building and tossed all of the dirty stuff he left behind. He was not happy. He brought up the stuff that wasn't broken and washed it before leaving again. Seemed to work. After that, he kept his stuff a little bit cleaner. Yes, it wasn't the right thing to do, but we were a bunch of ticked-off college kids. I hope he's gotten over it. Been so long I can't even remember his name. Not my proudest moment. Our next story is, I stole a car from a car thief. I woke up one night to the sound of my 95 Honda Civic trying to start. It wouldn't start because the thief hadn't found the off switch. There's a lot of car theft in my city, and those old Hondas are easy targets, so I'm glad I had that installed. I ran outside in my underwear and just shouted from the porch as deep and as loud as I could, "Hey, what the freak are you doing?" And then 2 people ran out of the car and down the street. The shouting woke up my roommates, and they came downstairs to see what was up. We peeked around, but the thieves had run off. Then a few minutes later, I hear the engine trying to start again. So I shout for my roommates to come back, and we all ran outside in our underwear and pajamas. One guy had a skateboard, one guy grabbed a bat. So we're all just standing on the porch, not trying to get physical, just shouting at them. The one thief yells back from another Honda parked just a few feet away from mine, "No, this is my car. We're just trying to get away. It's my car." I don't know what came over me, but I shouted back, "No, that's my car now. That's mine." And they just were like, okay, man, and ran off. I couldn't believe that it worked, but I think it only worked because of my 3 other roommates with the underwear and skateboard and bat. I called the police right away and stayed outside watching for them, but they didn't come back. The police checked their car, or my new car, and found that it was stolen, of course. So the owner got his car back, I guess. And I'm so glad I had that off switch. So I've had a few hand-me-down cars in my day, and some of them had like faulty, leaky batteries. I don't really know cars, so I'm just going to assume that whoever was helping me with my cars wasn't the most elegant at taking care of them or something. But basically, I had a few cars that basically had an off switch where you would have to go and open the hood and turn the switch on before the battery would actually connect and you could, start the car. Would definitely be helpful in a situation like this. The problem is my cars were probably so much of a beater, it wouldn't have mattered anyway. GReaper66 commented, "My wife has an 18-inch you-know-what from her hen night many years ago. We had someone break into our house, I grabbed that thing and went quietly downstairs. I confronted the person as he was putting my laptop into his bag and twatted him around the head with the you-know-what. He was knocked out as he hit his head on the wall. The cops arrived and took all the details, including our in-home security camera footage of him breaking in and then getting hit with my wife's you-know-what. At his trial, prolific burglar, the prosecution played the video as he was claiming I assaulted him. The judge, female, threw that out and loved the fact that I was happy in my masculinity to wield such a mighty weapon. That item is still kept in our bedroom in case it's ever needed to be used in anger again. Our next story is, copy my paper? Fine. Look like an idiot. I was pretty good at math pretty much since middle school, which is when this occurs. Some of our star athletes were not. One in particular used to copy my paper when we sat next to each other. I'm not sure if it had been the first time, but I remember a quiz being passed out, and from the corner of my eye, he was obviously eyeing my paper. No matter how much I moved in order to block his view, he was already unfairly tall, so there wasn't any way of stopping it. I could have told the teacher, of course, but I was already awkward. I didn't want to be a prime subject for more teasing by being a snitch. So I started doing the math in my head, taking a few moments longer to do the answers, but marking the wrong solutions to intentionally get him to mark the same ones. When it finally came time to turn in the paper, I faked to stand up, shifting in my chair slightly, while he shot up and raced to turn in his, obviously ready to be over it. I grinned gleefully as I changed my previous answers to my carefully filed away correct ones. When the scores came back, he had a 60% failing grade while I had a 90%. I saw his face when he compared our test scores and he quietly mumbled, "How?" To which I simply shrugged, telling him, "You should keep your eyes on your own paper." Sure enough, I never caught him trying to copy my paper again. Yes, it's been over 10 years since this happened, but I still feel a sense of pride for little me when I think about the crestfallen face of my petty revenge coming into fruition. Edit, to all the people commenting, "Why not let them cheat?" or "This is pathetic." Need I remind you what sub you're on? Where's your whimsy? Your sense of humor? I'm sure you weren't the most rational 12-year-old either. God, you know what? To tell you the truth, there's an old forum, when everybody used to talk on forums back in the day, before stuff like Reddit existed and Discord. And I think my account is still on whatever forum, and there's posts from when I'm like 12 years old on there. And let me tell you, I was not the most rational 12-year-old. I was quite the moron. Zorab1 commented, "Only a few times did I attempt to cheat, and that only on a couple questions that I wasn't sure of the answer, not the whole test. The two people I tried this on had answers I knew were wrong, so never did this again." OP responded, "Yeah, you can get their answers, but they never have to be right." That was what my history class was like. I used to try and cram as much before a test and regurgitate it back up, only sometimes I was wrong, but I never knew which ones until it was over. Our next story is The Universe's Petty Revenge. This is my grandmother's petty revenge, but I thought I would post it anyways because it's funny. So, my grandfather, who I've never met, divorced my grandmother after she gave birth to her second daughter. They married young, lived in a super conservative town, and he was obsessed with the idea of a son. After the divorce, my grandmother was ostracized for her failure. He married his second wife some months later. My grandmother had to stay in the town while she was saving up money to move, but once she did, she kept tabs on the town and her family. And guess what? Wife number 2 gave birth to a girl. And so did wife number 3. My grandfather had 5 wives, including grandmother, and all gave birth to girls. Wife number 2 had 3, wife number 3 had 2 and a stillborn, wife number 4 had 3, and wife number 5 had 1, but divorced him quickly because she didn't want to be blamed. It also came out that he had cheated with a neighbor who had 3 sons and 1 girl, and that 1 girl was his child. The husband divorced the neighbor, but she refused to marry my ex because he's defective. He's paying a fortune in support and can't find any other woman to marry him because, turns out, 20-something-year-olds don't want a 68-year-old. What's even more hilarious is the very Christian town has changed its tune and is now supportive of his daughters and his divorces. Turns out it's not the women's fault anymore. I don't even know the percentage of something like this, but it must be insane. As for my grandmother, remarried and had my uncle. Apparently her family back in the town loudly talked about how blessed my grandmother was for giving birth to a healthy son. Now, I know statistics and probabilities and whatnot, but isn't there like some kind of truth that like generally depending on your makeup, you might just be like way more likely as one half of the contributing genes to have daughters? I guess the question I'm trying to ask here is, considering the outcome where he had like what, 5, 6, 7 daughters? There has to be some kind of like predisposition in whatever's going on with his genes that favors having daughters, right? Or no? Bits of Yasmin commented, "That's actually hilarious. It's like life kept handing him daughters just to prove a point. Your grandma really got the last laugh without even trying, and the town switching sides now? So fake. Glad she moved on and had a good life. She deserved way better from the start." Our next story is, what lock? I'm legally blind and, unsurprisingly, was bullied in school. In 6th grade, while changing in the locker room, some of the other girls thought it was funny to move or hide my things. Once, my lock went missing and one of the girls, with the pretense of helping me find it, was asking me about it while she was holding it. Another time, one of my boots was thrown in a trash can outside the locker room. Another time, someone threw my gym shorts across the room. How did I know all this was going on if I'm blind? Well, first of all, there isn't just blind and sighted. Blindness is a spectrum. Second of all, there are 4 other senses besides sight which help a person learn what's going on around them, and I use those 4 senses. Anyway, one day I'd finally had enough, and one of the girls' locks was left on one of the benches, and I knew it. So after class began, I went back into the locker room claiming I had to use the restroom, took that lock, and tossed it into another section of lockers. When it was time to change, the girl couldn't find her lock. She and her friends suspected me, but I denied it. "I don't know where your lock is," I told them. Well, then I heard them talking and asking one of them to ask me, and the girl who was told to go ask me came up to me and said if I took the lock, she wasn't going to tell anybody. I guess they forgot I'm blind and not deaf. I'm also not stupid, and I told her, somebody must have taken it, thinking it was theirs. And sure enough, she went back to her little friend group and repeated what I said. I'm sure the lock was eventually found, but it's gratifying to know that I gave back what I was receiving all freaking year. Man, kids are awful. Like, these almost sound so stereotypical it's like from a Disney Channel movie or something. I'm Steven and you're watching Disney Channel. Up next is Seeing 2020. Rocco Saint commented, "Kids are jerks. In middle school, some punk stole my retainer, which was in its case, out of my locker during gym. I never knew who did it and I never found it. No one believed me because who would steal a retainer? My parents didn't even believe me and they were ticked that they had to pay for another one." Our next story is, she never hit me again. This happened when I was 8 or 9. For context, I'm in my 40s now. When/where I was growing up, physical discipline was not just the norm, but a moral imperative if you were to be considered a good parent. My parents worked long hours, and I was often left home with my grandma. Parenting responsibilities often fell to her, or so she seemed to think. One of her favorite methods of discipline was to have me go pick out a wooden spoon from the kitchen drawer, hand it to her, hold out a palm, and wait for her to smack it. She never went easy. One day, she accused me of breaking a little glass garden. It was just the small glass enclosure with some nicely arranged rocks, water, and moss inside. It was a gift from my mom to my dad. He liked those kinds of things, and to this day, I have no idea how it broke. I told her I didn't do it. She accused me of lying. I got lippy, and sure enough, go get a spoon. I had learned by now that the small spoons stung more. The big ones spread out their impact more evenly and also went slower. Besides, if I choose too small a spoon, Grandma would hit much harder as if to tell me I wasn't going to get away with it. But today, I was angry. I went to the kitchen and picked out the thinnest spoon I could find. I held it at each end, pushed my knee into the middle, and cracked it. Then, I fit the wooden splinters together as best I could before going back into the next room and handing her the sabotaged spoon. She didn't notice. It didn't help that her glasses were as thick as her thumbs. She did notice it was a thin spoon, however. She also noticed the dirty look I gave her, the first time I'd ever dared to be so brazen. She saw red. She took a mighty swing and the spoon broke in half. I put on an Oscar-worthy performance, wailing at the top of my lungs. I ran to my room and stayed there. She didn't chase me. Later, when my parents got home, I overheard her distraught telling them, "I had no idea I'd hit him that hard. I don't know what came over me. I'm sorry. Christ have mercy." That was the last time I ever got the wooden spoon, and also the last time she ever hit me, full stop. Although I overheard her apologize to my parents, she never apologized to me, so I let her feel guilty about that for the rest of her life, never telling her what I had done. It would be another 30 years before I would finally tell my own parents this, my earliest and longest held secret. Love you, Grandma. My grandpa got his butt whooped. Anybody else ever hear that song? It's a song from the not-so-well-aged Your Favorite Martian channel. Regardless, I just gotta say, it's never fun hearing a story like this about a kid who, whether or not you're the kind of person that says, "Oh, it was justified" or not, is getting smacked. That said, I definitely had a time or two when I was a little kid where I got the belt. I guess I would just say I'm fortunate that it stopped probably when I was like 5 years old. Consequence Top 9877 commented, "I wasn't this smart. I laughed and said, 'That didn't even hurt.' You can imagine how that went." Elegant T1212 commented, "I was frustrated as a kid with the beatings. I got done in by anything you can think of. Belt, wooden stick, ladle, wooden scale, steel scale, skipping rope, etc. One day, I just couldn't study. I was jittery and couldn't sit in one place. Mom whipped out the belt and said she would use it, and I told her, 'Go ahead.' Every time she stopped hitting me, I said, 'Go ahead.' I still got it later on, but that was the most I've ever gotten hit." Our next story is "No wood for you." I had to have a tree cut down last week. An arborist advised us to do so because it had a split. If it had fallen, there would be damages. It was huge. They counted over 90 rings. It was a beautiful silver maple. In our neighborhood, the backyards to homes share a fence or tree/bush line. The guy across from me has a gravel drive where he parks his truck, boat, and RV. It goes all the way back to our mutual border. We were always on good terms, so I figured he would let the tree company use it for their bucket truck. He said no. He did not trust them to not do damage. They were bonded, and I offered in writing to fix anything they broke. Still no. Okay, I brought over the backhoe and removed several bushes to make a road on one side. For labor cost, a friend who's a paving contractor brought over 20 steel plates to lay in my yard. His workers put them in place. I told my neighbor I would do that for his driveway. It helped. I will have to trill and resod some, but most of my yard survived with little damage. His would have none. Maybe needed a little gravel replaced. The company got it down, sawed into firewood-sized pieces except one section, and the rest into a wood chipper. They were finished and gone in 3 hours. Today, my grandson and friends came over with the wood splitter. We have a shelter near the side door that holds 2 cords of wood. There's a smaller one near the back door. We have enough wood there now to burn this summer in the fire pit on the patio, so every piece went on the dump truck, and he took it to the farm so it can season. After they finished and I was raking up twigs, the guy asked if I was going to give him some wood. I had in the past. I just pointed at the pile and kept raking. He said, "Really?" I said, "Really?" and more or less ignored him. I have plenty of wood at the farm, and normally I would have asked him to pay the kids and they would cut and stack it for him. He could have gotten $3,000+ worth of firewood for $300. Not today. My neighbor beside me helped with the bushes. They have a fireplace but only use it for romantic nights. They know the two of them can come over and get all the wood they need. There's no fence between the houses, just the backyards. Out back, it's my fence. I may get a new one, this one without a gate. I have a feeling our terms have changed. They're no longer good. I thought about having my son weld it shut, but that would be way too passive-aggressive, or plant native wisteria. It's damp enough back there, and in a couple of years, be partway up the other trees to give us even more privacy. There was a 7-foot section of the 4-foot thick tree that was solid. A buddy has a cabinet shop. He jumped on that. It's at the sawmill now. I also saved our 9 4-foot straight pieces that one day may become baseball bats. Another buddy's pretty good at that. I can honestly say I feel petty as can be right now. I feel like going back over there now for a swim and maybe toast some marshmallows, but it's past midnight. I'm far too lazy for that. Look, if the guy was that concerned that maybe they would do some damage or mess something up and they didn't want to take OP's word for it, even with like a written in paper signed thing that may or may not actually be legally binding, Fair enough, it's completely their right, but they can't saddle up and be like, "Hey OP, now that you've got it done, can I have some of that stuff?" Like, how crappy do you have to be to show up and be like, "Well, hey, where's my wood?" Just about as bad as one of those, "Where's my hug?" kind of people. Final Echidna 6743 commented, "Some neighbors can be real jerks. Many years ago when I was a firefighter, we were called to a house fire. This area, the homes were on 3 to 4 acre lots. It was a rural location without fire hydrants. One neighbor had a pond that we could draw water from to fight the fire, except he would not allow us to drive on the edge of his lawn, hard dry ground. Would have had little to no damage and was the most direct access to the water. We had to go around the block and come in from the back side of the pond through rougher ground and taller grass and brush. Didn't care that his neighbor's house was on fire, only that his pristine lawn might have been ruffled." Renbar commented, "I live in France. You can register your swimming pool as a water source for firefighters if the normal ones, trucks and hydrants, are not enough, and you have to give an easy access, or in case of a very dangerous fire, it can be requisitioned by the police. Do you have the same rights in the US, or is it different by state, counties, cities?" Our next story is Bin Etiquette Note. 10 years ago, we lived in an old mansion turned apartment complex that had shared rubbish and recycling bins located outside near the front of the building. In order to keep the bins from overfilling, we had to ensure that every box we threw in the recycling was crushed. One of the neighbors, Unit 8, was in charge of putting the bins out weekly, recycling fortnightly. 2 young women lived in Unit 15 and would never crush their boxes, causing a constant overflow, and other neighbors, especially Unit 8, had to keep crushing these boxes for Unit 15 to ensure we didn't have rubbish blown all over the front of the building fit everyone's rubbish. He tried to talk to them on multiple occasions, taped notes to the bin, kindly reminding people of bin etiquette, but still no change. One day we came home to the following note taped to the front door of the building entrance for all to see. Yes, I took a photo of it, but it was blurry, so I retyped it for this post. "Attention, slag in 15, this is not a reference to the chick with the tattoos. It appears from your note that you can write. However, your bin etiquette suggests that you cannot read. I've tried to approach you politely on a previous occasion, inquiring as to whether or not you were satisfied with procedure. Surely no one is so stupid that they can't work out how to use a bin, I thought. Not sure how they did it in the trailer park, but your rubbish came to my attention because the lid of the recycling bin was up at a 45-degree angle. This allows the wind, or animals, to pull the rubbish out and litter the property. We don't need to add loose garbage to your shopping trolley collection. The reason your garbage was returned and a box crushing demonstration attempted was because it had been discarded, still in the bag, with the shoe and male body part boxes intact. As the notice says, please empty bags and crush boxes in order that the bin can accommodate 2 weeks worth of rubbish. There are 3 buildings on this block between K Avenue and D Road. None of the other tenants have any problem observing the etiquette. In fact, many have commented that the situation with the bins has improved greatly since the notices were affixed. Your property manager, B, has been informed of the situation today. He says he'll contact you. I wonder if the toy has remained stiff. I do feel sorry for it. We never had bin issues after that, and she moved out shortly afterwards. To be fair, if she doesn't want anybody rifling through her trash and seeing what she's throwing out, you probably should break it down and make sure that it's compressed enough that nobody is going to look at it. I mean, I'm surprised considering it got to that point that they even cared enough to even shape up after getting called out about their male-shaped toy box thing. Avid Learner Bot commented, "This whole situation kind of reminds me of when I organized the annual neighborhood potluck and had to deal with some prickly personalities. Anyway, kudos to OP for not only crushing those boxes, but also penning such a side-splitting takedown note. Maybe they should mark it as bin etiquette therapy." Our next story is, oh, you want to be a butt? Enjoy seating your butt on a wet seat? In high school, there was this girl who was really unpleasant. She would be my friend when she needed something, but would ignore me at other times. One day, she commented to a guy in our class saying, "Just because you look Asian doesn't mean you're smart." I was appalled. I could see he was visibly upset, but just walked away without saying anything. Now for the petty part. I've always been the type to arrive at class before anyone else. Whenever it rained, I would purposely spill the water from my umbrella all over her seat, which was next to the door. The teacher caught me doing this once, but simply looked away. I did it every time it rained and only on her seat. The look of confusion on her face was worth it. It may not be the pettiest story, but I felt I had to get back at her for being so unpleasant. Now that I'm an adult, I wish I had taken it a step further and stepped on her chair with my muddy shoes. I feel like the only thing that could have made this story a little bit better is OP saying that they lived in like Seattle or Portland or somewhere where it just rains all the time. You know, it would be another thing if they were like, oh yeah, by the way, I live in Arizona. Different Lunch 8508 commented, the best petty revenge is simply accomplished with minimal effort. The more elaborate it is, the less satisfaction we're likely to get from it because we've expended all this energy in being petty, and the payout isn't always as significant as we're hoping it'll be. But this is perfect, especially because your teacher also knew you were doing it and didn't stop you. There's satisfaction in just that one thing. The girl never suspected it was you, I'm guessing. You should have put bleach or something in the rainwater before you shook it out on that chair. That would have been petty. Edit to ask, did you know where this girl is today, and is she still as unpleasant, or has karma smacked her already? Our next story is, block my promotion? I'll block you from getting hired. Story from many years ago, I was working at a large company with plenty of politics. Promotions within a division were reviewed by a group of middle managers from different departments in that division during a live meeting with the head of the division. I was up for promotion but didn't get it. I ended up getting it 6 months later, but the damage was done. I had sought out other jobs by then, had an offer, and quit. A couple of my manager-level friends were in the meeting and told me why I got blocked. A manager from another department who I hadn't ever worked with stood up and argued against my promotion, probably because this person was upset that a promotion she had put up was successfully argued against by my own department head. She had made up some totally untrue bull about my performance in order to get her way. 4 years later, I'm a department head at a small company when we open a position as head of the function that my promotion blocker was a part of, and sure enough, she applies and is scheduled for an interview when I get contacted by HR because they noticed we worked at the same company at the same time. I remember her blocking my promotion, so I told HR that she wasn't good, wouldn't be a good fit, hiring her would be a mistake, blah blah blah. Got her interview canceled. They just told her that we decided to elevate an internal candidate. 3 years later, this small company would end up getting taken out by a larger company for a massive stock price increase over the price we were at when the position opened. Because we had lots of stock options, I effectively cost her an enormous payday. So satisfying. That's what she gets for being a jerk in a very connected industry. In general, it probably is very much kind of a good process and a line of thinking to try to get along or kind of swallow your pride when something comes along that would upset you in a field like this. That said, it's way easier to say, oh, well, I would be very composed and I would understand my future is in jeopardy here in this connected industry, and another to actually be in that situation and have that opportunity to kind of lash out or make a strong statement one way or another. Shadazzle24 commented, I love stories like these, but I just wish once someone would accept the jerk candidate and then actually go to the interview and then deny them the position. The feeling of, ah yes, how does it feel from your end would be so amazing. Frogsama86 commented, I had the opportunity of being in the interview of my ex-manager. My current manager was interviewing, I was just there for vibe checking as the candidate hired would be working with me. The panic in her eyes was glorious. Told my manager later that if he hires her, he would get my resignation too. She was not hired despite being HR's preferred candidate. Our next story is, followed a rude lady around the supermarket with a crying child. My mom's story, not mine. My brother as a toddler was pretty difficult to look after, later diagnosed with ASD. One day, he was just being a pretty standard 2-year-old at the supermarket, crying because he didn't get what he wanted. My mom was trying to comfort him when an older lady walked past and gave off with, "For goodness sake." Well, my mom, who was at this point exhausted, fed up, and just trying to get through her weekly shop, snapped. She proceeds to follow this lady around the store everywhere. Any aisle this lady went to, my mom would suddenly need something in the same aisle. Crying toddler in trolley and all. My mom pretended to browse the shelves in the same area. This lady got a third of the way through the store before just heading to the tills and going home. And Mom then went about her normal shop. So I get it, she's upset, she's frustrated, she's got the crying toddler that she has to deal with and go home with and whatnot. But does anybody else feel like it's not exactly a fair revenge to have exacted? Like, sure, the lady in passing shouldn't have been like, for goodness sake, your crying baby is so annoying. But was she really wrong, though? And she's just passing by, she's gonna be gone in a second. This money is not for Dawn commented. One time when my mom was a kid, as my grandma was getting out of the car at the store, parked in a handicap space, a lady walking by said, "You don't look handicapped to me." My grandma proceeded to get her disabled son into his wheelchair and then chased the lady down and said, "What about him? Does he look handicapped to you?" Ranting Squirrel commented, "Similar but not. I was 8.5 months pregnant and the size of a whale ready to pop. Went to Aldi, UK, specifically because if you're heavily pregnant, you can use the parent and child spaces because you need more room to get out. I parked and this old woman circled my car looking through the back windows to see if there was a child, then tutted so loudly I heard her with the windows shut. I clambered out as she walked towards the shop and shouted, 'I'm allowed to park here,' pointing to my huge belly, and she scurried off into the store embarrassed because people turned to look at her. I was hormonal and in pain as my baby was already engaged in my pelvis. It really upset me, so I'd been visibly crying when I walked into the store with my trolley. A member of the staff asked if I was okay, and I loudly said what had happened. They looked and just said just as loud, 'Pregnant mothers can use the spaces.' I then proceeded to go down every aisle she did and she would run away. She definitely did not get everything she needed as she left pretty quickly. I waddled that whole shop in pain with my hips and got a parking ticket for being in there so long as I couldn't walk fast and was doing a huge stock up for when the baby came. Got out of the ticket too. Win-win. Our next story is, one sweet move put an end to the daily haggles. Living in a joint family is not easy. You have to make adjustments every now and then, sometimes with the family members, or sometimes with their relatives, friends, and all. At our home, there are 2 entrances that connect the house with the main road. And every day, at any point of time, there's always someone outside visiting our home for his or her business. This happened 9 to 10 months ago when my uncle's brother-in-law made a visit for some reason. He's a regular visitor. During that time, there was some construction going on at our house due to which one of the entrances was blocked. That brother-in-law came, parked his motorcycle with a locked handle just in front of the other entrance that was open for all, and went in. I was in a hurry that day, and getting my motorcycle on the road became a hardcore job. I called him multiple times, but he never answered. Went to my uncle's home, only to find that his brother-in-law left with uncle without leaving any key. Somehow, I managed to move his bike out of my way and went out. This happened numerous times afterwards, and even after complaining, he never parked at the right spot. Then came the sweet revenge that changed the scenario completely. That entrance, which was open, is just below my balcony. It's an open balcony, and I spend quite a lot of time there. In all these days, I've noticed that he always parked his motorcycle just below the balcony. Imagine it like, if you jump from my balcony, you'll land on the seat of that motorcycle. One fine day, I had a pretty bad cough. I used to smoke a lot and that could be the reason, so in the afternoon, after he parked on the usual spot and went in, I had a severe coughing, a real mouthful. Instead of spitting anywhere else, I spat on his seat. A fourth of the seat got covered with deep green to teal mucus, with lots of white bubbles and other sticky saliva, especially that part where he sits. It's been quite a long time now, many days passed, but never ever did he park his motorcycle there at the usual spot. So you're telling me that Hawk Tua may not always be a good thing? OP is looking into a part-time position as an alpaca? Reports have come in, high chance of rain solely from that balcony? You be the judge. Our next story is, careful with your carry-on bags. I was on a flight. It was the first leg of a journey. I had pre-boarded and settled into my seat. I had chosen a window seat. The flight wasn't full, so there was plenty of room, but with open seating, you better grab the seat that you want. I wanted a window seat. They're usually the first to go. Mother and 2 kids, looked to be elementary school aged, also pre-board and chose the row behind me. The kids have carry-on bags, knapsacks with their gaming devices. I'd seen them in the airport. The mother makes eye contact with me. She asks me to give up my window seat so both of her kids could look out the window. I say no. I get an eye roll and a sigh. A few minutes later, general boarding is happening. Along comes the father. He's standing at the end of the row I'm sitting in, and he asks, "Why aren't both the kids in window seats?" He didn't ask me, but I felt like it was directed to me. I'm not moving. I don't want to sit in an aisle or center seat. And why didn't he pre-board with one child to ensure having a window seat for the child? The father sits on the end of the row I'm in, the center seat was empty, the announcements are made, the kids are told that their bags must be stowed, but they can keep their devices out to play with. No one seems to be interested in the window. The flight takes off, and the seat kicking starts. I ask the father to please ask your kid to stop kicking my seat. Nothing happens. I loudly say, "Please tell your kid to stop kicking my seat." The father tells me if you had given up your window seat, he wouldn't have to kick your seat. I considered asking the mom, but she seemed to be checked out and rather useless. Flight attendant comes over and tells the kid to stop. As soon as she left, the father tells the kid to kick the seat. The entire time in the air, this was a cyclical occurrence. Kid kicks because father told him to. I loudly ask the father to tell the kid to stop. Father doesn't. Flight attendant tells the kid to stop. Kid stops for a few minutes until dad tells him to start again. This was a good deal of the flight. I keep shifting in my seat to get comfortable. It's torture, but I'm not going to let it ruin my day. I have a plan. I had one small bag in the overhead. An announcement was made, if anyone has a connecting flight scheduled to leave within the hour, please raise your hand so we can get you out as quickly as possible so you can make your next flight. I had a connecting flight, but it wasn't for another 3 hours. I was meeting up with some friends between my flights. I noticed that the Kicker family did not raise their hands. They were staying on the plane. I raised my hand. I really didn't need to. I wasn't in a rush. But they didn't need to know. The plane lands and taxis to the gate. Now I have to pretend that I'm in a hurry. The father, Mr. Kicker, at the end of the row, just sits there. He makes absolutely no attempt to move so I can get out of the row. Just acts like I've inconvenienced him the entire flight. I'm sure he would have loved for me to miss my flight. I let the other passengers, who were obviously in a hurry, get off the plane first. I got out of the row, stood up, opened the overhead bin, pretended to have to move a few items around to get my carry-on bag out. In reality, I didn't have to move anything. I unzipped their carry-on bags, large knapsacks. I grabbed my bag and exited the plane. Now when they go to grab their bags, all their stuff is going to spill out. That's going to be an inconvenience. Well, at least for those parents, at least the kids seem somewhat obedient. They're more than happy to kick on command. Hopefully they'll be more than happy to play pickup on command. Sakura Kicks 094 commented, "Oh crap, the turbulence is so bad. Throw a cup of water over your head." Or actually swap so the kids get your seat and you take their one in the row behind. Big mistake for them now. Stoop to their level and kick their seats back. And bother the other kid who's next to you too. Bonus if you start kicking the father's seat also. OP responded, "The turbulence idea is a great one, but unless the entire plane was affected by the turbulence, throwing a cup of water on them could be seen as assault." I'd already started to formulate my plan, and as far as kicking their seat, I really didn't want to have to sit with them. Our next story is Measure Twice. I measure and fit window blinds for a living, so many of my days are spent traveling around the city, trying to find parking, measuring and quoting for blinds that I'll be fitting if the customer wants to go ahead. I work for myself, but days can be very long. I had an inquiry from a lady. She insisted that I came early evening, much later than I would usually work. Anyway, as I'm up my ladder, she asks if I can tell her the measurements. I say no and explain that this is my skill set and how I make a living. As I write down the sizes for each blind, I add 2 inches extra to the width and subtract 2 inches from the real height. Just as I guessed, I caught her snapping a photo of my pad with her phone. I never heard from her again. You know, all of a sudden, it's really starting to make sense why all these companies you call for services have a $5, $10, $15 examination fee just to maybe kind of weed out the people who do exactly this kind of thing. You know, get that diagnosis and then shop around for whoever can do it for the lowest amount of money. Duck Wild Goose commented, "Absolutely blinding moves, my guy." Blinding? I'm totally stealing this. tired of potential clients taking sneaky photos of my notes when I come to look at a job and jot down rough numbers for time and materials? Yasmin in color replied, exactly, too many treat your time like it's free. Gotta look out for yourself. People forget this is how we make a living. Akalia Wolfsong commented, my mother does something like this. She's got a side business of portrait and family photography. Her first 2 clients were work friends. One lady had my mother going to 3 different locations for photos for her family and one child's senior pictures. Mom took over 400 photos. She goes overboard to make sure she has some excellent pictures for the final ones. Spends all day doing this. Lady asks for a flash drive of the best ones Mom took. My mom, trying to protect her income, said sure, and loaded about 50 of the best shots before editing anything onto a flash drive. She saved them as thumbnail size, just big enough that you could see the people in them clearly, but trying to blow them up to full size would make them way pixelated and unusable. The lady tried to argue with Mom about the sizes. Lady only paid for 5 photos. Our next story is, you'll never do that again. I live deep in the heart of suburbia in an upper middle class area. We had a nice semi-private yard until the neighbors directly behind us sold their home and moved. The new people, who have 2 teenage sons and have been there for 4 years now, cut down all the trees and shrubs on their side of the fence, which transformed my nice private yard into a semi-public space. We weren't happy, but there was nothing we could do about it since it was their yard. We did plant shrubs on our side, but it's still not as covered as it was before they moved in. Now, the shrubs at least partially obstruct their view of my yard. They put a basketball set up on their patio, and their 2 extremely uncoordinated sons are constantly outside playing sports and tossing bricks against the backboard. They also love kicking soccer balls, tossing tennis balls, and throwing Crocs around. Again, their yard, so as much as I don't like it, I keep my mouth shut. I loved playing sports as a boy, and I wasn't the greatest athlete, but I was always respectful of my neighbors and kept my balls in my own yard, and when I didn't, was nice and apologetic about it. The 2 kids behind me aren't like that at all. Once they move in, their balls and Crocs were regularly in my yard, as well as their next-door neighbors' yards. At first, they would either ring my bell to ask for them, or if I saw them, I would just toss them back over the fence. But how much is too much? It was happening weekly. Then they would just stop coming over to ask, and their balls would just sit in my yard until I tossed them over. Last summer, I just collected them near my side of the fence behind my shed and let them sit there until late autumn until I finally tossed them back. This year, a soccer ball was in my yard. Soccer balls aren't inexpensive. We let it sit there for a good 2 weeks. When our landscaper came to do the lawn maintenance, we told them they could have the ball. We haven't had a ball in our yard since. Edit, I'm not the crotchety old man. If they came and asked for the balls, I would happily give them back, but they don't. They sort of forget that they came over the fence. Personally, I would prefer they come and get them. Yes, I've spoken to the parents, but they don't care either. I'm also not complaining that they're using their own yard. Cutting down the trees was their decision, and although it does affect me, I didn't say a word because it's not my property and they can do what they want in their yard. After being nice and throwing them back for 4 years, how much longer should I keep doing it? It's happened multiple times in a day, and it's very annoying. The kids are teenagers and are just kicking the balls and throwing them all over sometimes. They should know better. Now they can play with other balls. Growing up, and still to this day, I'm a very big basketball fan, so I've always had a basketball hoop somewhere in my yard. One of the biggest banes of my existence is when something happens that the ball perfectly careens into a neighbor's yard and over the fence. When I was in my early teens, I lived in a place where the neighbor was incredibly mean-spirited. Like, you wouldn't want to go over there, you wouldn't want to talk to them, you would just let them live in their own crotchety corner of the world over there. There was one time I took a very deep shot and it bounced off the rim and it just had so much momentum it bounced, hit another thing, and went right between our 2 fences. It's hard to describe the feeling in that moment, that just like, welp, okay then, gone forever. You know, like that gif of Elmo doing a little shrug and then just walking away and being like, guess I'll have to get a new basketball. Left Coast Leslie C. commented, I once had a neighbor whose dog, when he would hear me in my yard, would lob his ball over the fence. I loved it so much. I know this is way different, but this post brought back fun memories from many years ago. Quahog News commented, along the same vein, when I was a little kid in the 70s, occasionally 45 RPM vinyl records, kids, ask your parents, would come sailing over the tall brick wall that stood between us and our backyard neighbor. We never knew when to expect them, what we would get, or how many would show up, but we got many free 70s hits this way for several years. We never found out the story behind the music. Was it a sibling rivalry situation? Just someone who played a song to death and then sent it sailing off to oblivion? No matter why, my brother and I had a great time playing the tunes until our interests took us other places. Our next story is listening to loud music on the bus, not on my watch. This occurred a few years ago. I commented about it in reply to another post yesterday and people liked it, so I figured I would put it as an actual post. I was riding a popular bus home from an event and the bus was absolutely packed. It was a Friday night on a popular route for commuting to downtown, so it was very crowded, and people were standing through the entire aisle. Since we were all trapped on the bus, no one was in the mood to listen to some entitled jerk's music. The jerk had their music playing on their smartphone speaker, not even a decent speaker. They had their phone on full blast. They didn't have the common decency to use headphones. After a long day at work, I wasn't going to be annoyed by listening to someone's actually decent music on totally subpar speakers. I took out my phone, used a music identifier app to figure out what song was playing, started to play that song, made my phone very quiet, and synced my copy of their song with the exact time span of their copy. Then I paused my phone for a couple of seconds and cranked its volume to the max before hitting play, and the music played the same song on a very annoyingly timed delay. Their music stopped within 20 seconds. So if anybody's ever messed with like recording and singing and layering vocals, they'll know exactly what's going on here, or even just having two copies of the same thing playing slightly delayed. If anybody's curious how annoying it is, I can actually just give you an example here. So, for example, here's slightly delayed audio so you know how annoying it is. Doesn't really make for the greatest listening experience, does it? Echo Aquani commented, "This reminded me of COVID time. My girlfriend and I were standing outside in line waiting to get a boba tea. This lady in front of us had her phone jacked up to full voice volume, listening to a Spanish show on her phone. My girlfriend got the bright idea of finding Romanian music and playing it super loud and started dancing and singing to it. She turned her volume way down, and when she left, her and her husband just glared at us when they drove off." Our next story is, my ex cheated on me with a friend of mine I introduced him to. But the petty revenge of the story is against said friend. When I found out about it, I'd already broken up with my ex for other affairs he had. I, male 26 when this happened, met this friend, male 28, at the university. Let's call him Mario. Mario told me how his family situation was bad. His father was super homophobic. He had no friends and felt really depressed. Since he lived in a city close to my ex's city, I introduced him to my ex's group of friends living around there. Sometimes when I was studying for exam sessions, I couldn't join them, but I was okay and trusted them both that they could spend time together. Anyway, long story short, 1 year later, this situation started. I broke up with my ex because I found out he cheated on me with other guys. 8 months after the breaking up, my sister told me that actually, when I was still with my ex, Mario, that was a shared friend of ours, had a situation with him. Basically, he was so proud of it that he shared the story with people at the university. One of them happened to be very close to a girl that was my sister's best friend, so the info arrived to me. However, they asked me not to tell anything before Mario's birthday party in order to not ruin the party. It was planned a week after they told me, for the other friend that he shared the party with. I kept the promise. I went to the party. It was a little bit awkward, but my group of friends made the party easier to go through. When we had to leave, I didn't say goodbye to him. I deleted him from every social network we shared, and from that moment, since he had fun telling his story to lots of people at the university, I helped him in the process. I told about it to everyone he knew and that knew him, including the professor he was writing the graduation thesis with. That happened to be the same professor I wrote my graduation thesis with. I told it to his best friends that confronted him and felt betrayed by his behavior. His best friend told me she was so mad, not just for what he did, but that he did it to me, that I've always been kind, helpful, and welcoming with everyone, including him. he lost every single friend he had at that time. After 3 to 4 months, he sent me a DM where he told me that he found out I knew about him and my ex, and that he was sorry. Really sorry, because he felt he wronged me twice. First for doing it, and second for not telling me. He wanted to speak with me. Told me he felt so sorry and I had the right to insult him and even hit him if I felt the need to. I never replied. After 1.5 years, he wrote me again saying that he had started therapy and the therapist suggested him to find closure with all the bad situations he found himself into. That he needed my forgiveness because he wanted to change. Again, I didn't reply. That forgiveness was more to make himself feel better than to make me feel better. Honestly, I had no reason to reply. At that point, I had a new boyfriend that is still my partner now after 8 years, met new friends, left my university life behind, but kept in touch with some friends from there. Didn't need him again as a friend. I felt emotionally not involved anymore with that situation. He had chosen to wrong me, and it's okay, but I wasn't going to put up again with his crap, honestly. I don't know what happened to him later. I just know he didn't graduate anymore and moved to another city. Oopsie. So, I don't know what it says about me, but would anybody else actually get some sense of satisfaction that it kind of seemed to really bother them? Also, I've got to say kudos to all of those friends who knew this guy and actually admonished him and stopped being his friend after doing this. I feel like it's pretty common that somebody comes along like this and is a total jerk and cheats and messes the friend group up, and some of them just still act like it didn't happen and stick with the status quo. Weekend Wench commented, "You hit the nail on the head. He's seeking closure for himself, not to truly apologize to you for his wrongdoing. It's to make himself feel good." Spinner of Yarn commented, "Yup. Apologizing is always something people should do when they truly are remorseful, but no one ever owes a perpetrator forgiveness. Forgiveness is a point the wronged party may internally reach in case they've been feeling bitter as a way of making peace for themselves. They don't owe it to anyone who's wronged them. I almost always think with something like cheating, seeking forgiveness from the one they hurt is always a selfish move. In the case of cheating, when it was a one-time, one-night stand that has never happened again, I think the offending party confesses not because they think their partner should know, but because of guilt. It's just another way of being selfish. Now, if their partner is going to find out, yes, they should learn from the partner that cheated. For me personally, I could get past a one-time, one-night stand. I couldn't if only emotional. Our next story is, Classmate got pranked by fake letter after screwing us over. Old story. This is a very old revenge from when I was a teenager in the 90s. There were only a few PC gamers around at the time, and without internet, it was hard to get a hold of new games. Me and a friend bought games from abroad via airmail because local stores didn't sell many, but these weren't cheap. We would trade them with each other and would copy the copy protection, which was often included, so this made it semi-affordable for us. A new kid joined our class, however, and his uncle had tons and tons of games we didn't have. We offered to trade games with him and gave him our original copies for him to copy, and in return we got corrupted floppies, yes, this was the 90s, missing copy protection, etc. And after a few months of this, we received not a single working game while he had received all of our games. The Settlers, Doom 2, Monkey Island games, etc. And some he returned in less than nice condition. We had enough, and we wanted to get revenge, but we didn't know how. Now, the 90s were known for the many AIDS campaigns after Freddie Mercury died of AIDS in 1991. I was a huge fan of Queen, and this new friend would often mock me for liking a gay singer. He came from a very conservative family, and his mother was quite Catholic. And this is what gave us an idea when we had to attend an AIDS event organized by a certain foundation with our class. At the end, we were given flyers about AIDS, homosexuality, etc., and free condoms with the logo of the AIDS Foundation were up for grabs. We each grabbed a few for reasons you'll soon reach below. Me and my friend were one of the very few with a computer and inkjet printer at home, so we got this idea to screw him over. We created a fake letter addressed to our friend, pretending we were the AIDS Foundation, copying the logo and everything to make it look as authentic as possible. It went something like this. Dear first name, thank you for your letter. We understand it's difficult being open about being homosexual, and you have many questions after the event you attended with your class. Please find enclosed a flyer which should answer many of your questions as well as some condoms. Please practice safety at all times. We enclosed all the flyers we had gotten at the event as well as the condoms and mailed it to Mr. Last Name to guarantee his father would open the letter first. We had no idea the crap storm this would create. We knew him being homophobic, this would be great revenge, but apparently his mother had been in tears, screaming, his father angry, and he was grounded for weeks with his parents convinced he was gay. In the end, he figured we had something to do with it because we'd been carefully fishing to see if our prank had succeeded. But at first, he thought the letter was authentic and we had contacted the foundation in his name. When we finally confessed we had faked it all, we had a nice trip to the principal to explain why we had done this with his parents present. It's still the best revenge I ever took in my life, even though it was 30 years ago. I mean, the revenge is great and all, but I'm kind of just caught up on like the old computers and the tech and the floppy disks. I was kind of just barely old enough that floppy disks were a thing, especially because my dad was kind of fascinated by computers, even if he wasn't like super full into it. I mean, even just like mentioning copy protection is so retro. Subrus commented, "Doom 2 took me back years." And the excitement when Duke Nukem came out? OP responded commenting, "I had a lot of the classics of the time, Duke Nukem 3D, Doom 2, SimCity 2000, a lot of the LucasArts games, TIE Fighter, Dark Forces, Sam & Max, Full Throttle, etc. It was a fun but expensive hobby and all of my allowance went towards buying them. In those early days, games still came on floppies or were small enough to be copied to share with friends. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.